All right, back to Monday Night Football. DRS, before we dive into the props, let's talk season outlook for both of these teams. Philly wins in Sao Paulo. They see the Cowboys get hammered at home. The Giants are a terrible franchise. The Commanders are going to be competitive, but nothing all that great. The Birds now nearly a $2 favorite to win the NFC East, to continue the trend of nearly 2 decades of no repeat champions, and the Cowboys won it a season ago. 11.5 the win total for Philadelphia. The Falcons entered this year as a minus 140 divisional odds-on favorite to claim the NFC South. They lost badly at home to the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 1. Meanwhile, the 3-time reigning NFC South champs, the Bucs, a perfect 2-0, impressive victories in both. And the Saints might be the most impressive team through 2 weeks in the NFL, also 2-0. A lot of changing tides entering this Week 2 matchup.
Yes, there is. And also, if you are taking a look at that future, I'm still not out on the Atlanta Falcons at this point. But sometimes, Ben, this is the tough part about the offseason. You sold a bill of goods where the quarterback is ready, he's healthy, he's ready to go. Don't you remember us having this conversation on this morning show saying, you know what? Michael Penix not playing in that final preseason last 2 games. They're fine. They saw enough. And everybody who credit the beat report is like, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like they need to save Michael Penix so he can't get injured in the preseason because they just might need him for regular season action, which wouldn't jive unless you saw the performance out of Kirk Cousins, where the internet sleuths now are watching a change stance and constant shotgun where Kirk Cousins can't take a 5-step drop because it's too much pounding on that Achilles here. That is a major issue. And coming into tonight, I want to be on the lookout for that. And also, for the rest of the season, if he's working his way back, that's never a good sign for any quarterback in any situation. So there's more question marks for me from Atlanta Falcons side, but from an Eagles perspective, you're not going to get a fight from Washington. You're not going to get a fight from the Giants. You thought after week number 1, hey, look, Dallas Cowboys going to be formidable. And we're not writing off the Dallas Cowboys. That was a really bad performance, which brings to light Jerry Jones's offseason. But again, we knew they had 2 great football players. Dak Prescott, regular season quarterback, CeeDee Lamb at wideout. Who are going to be the rest of the guys that can step up on offense? Through the first 2 weeks, nobody's been stepping up anywhere, which includes everybody. How could you have Rico Dowdle as your starting, running back? Oh, no, don't worry. We'll bring back Ezekiel Elliott. Stop the madness here. It's the Eagles' division now to win for them, even after 3 weeks. And for the Atlanta Falcons, I have a lot more questions than I had even after these first 2 weeks are going to be over, because I don't know if they're healthy enough, to be honest.
Plus 280 for the Dirty Birds. We have the Saints as the favorites, the Bucs less than a 2-1 price, and now Atlanta at plus 280. I cannot wait to get into the prop conversation for this game, where they focus on that quarterback in Kirk Cousins. Again, it's a weird thing that Kirk now in 3 consecutive seasons is going to play in Philadelphia in week 2 in a primetime game. Of course, the previous 2 years with Minnesota, the Vikings covered last year, but they've lost by at least 6 in both of those 2 games. And Kirk was downright awful last week in his Atlanta debut. Is it because of the Achilles? We'll talk about it next. Hour 3 starts after the break. Welcome to hour number 3, our third and final to start off this new week, bright and early on a Monday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. We set the stage for the end of week number 2 around the National Football League regular season. Tonight in Philadelphia, it's the Eagles and the Falcons on Monday Night Football. We will continue our game breakdown here to start off this segment. We'll get the injury perspective, the insight, and the analysis from Dr. David Chow in our next segment together. The prop perspective later on in this third and final hour, and some picks and best bets for you before we go. DRS, let's hear from the people before we really dive into anything here around Monday Night Football to see what the public is thinking when it comes to Monday night. What is the best bet for Monday Night Football between the Eagles and the Falcons? That was the question to all of you in Fade the Public. At SportsGrid on Twitter, what is the best bet for Monday Night Football? Hashtag NFL, hashtag BettingX, at RiseSideVP, at Ben Scott Stevens. They got to stop leaving out the T, especially when it comes to a Philadelphia poll where Mr. Philadelphia, Mr. South Jersey, can integrate a whole new audience if he is able to see it. Were you able to splash the Riz Twiz on the Fade the Public poll without being properly tagged?
Yeah, when we say like to reach out to the people, one of the people certainly isn't me to reach out to because I just found it right now and hit the retweet on it, and my Philly brethren would have loved to jump in. So instead of maybe a couple hundred votes, maybe this would be pushed over a couple hundred more than what we've already have. So me just seeing the poll here, fantastic. Eagles, Falcons side, over, under as a certain side. So, look, yeah, right. I'm going to participate in this poll. I just voted on it. Now we're seeing the numbers start to move with the retweet. We just got 5 more votes here in the past couple seconds. And from my money, 17%ers I'm with here, BSS. I went under 46.5. You say, Donnie, well, you know you like the Philadelphia Eagles. You think they're going to win that football? There's a reason why that number went from 6.5 to 5.5. I do think the Falcons will be better than they were on opening day. On offense, that's going to be the question mark. On defense, I know they're pretty decent. You got that secondary back there, and also that's a massive loss. You lose a top 5 wide receiver from your lineup. I understand you have Devonta Smith. He's fantastic. Maybe you're hoping Jahan Dotson steps up here, but that's going to hurt. That's that big play weapon that you're taking away where now the defense, who does have some pretty good cornerbacks, can roll coverage to Devonta Smith. I like the under best of the bets tonight here from me.
A lot of people back in the birds, that being the Eagles, laying 5.5, 53% of the votes on Philadelphia. Then it's the Falcons as the dog, the under for the game. The one I voted for, DRS, is actually the least selected by the public. That's over 46.5. I'm not sure I'm going to bet it. And here's why I say that. I want Atlanta to be the scoring offense that we expected them to be earlier in the offseason, with the acquisition of Kirk Cousins, with Bijan Robinson, with the talented core around him, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, maybe a resurgence, and a couple of other offseason acquisitions like Darnell Mooney. Atlanta was going to be a team that I had circled in the offseason as an overbet a lot when it came to the point output, 18-10 last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. You would think, though we saw a lot of points in Sao Paulo, Donnie has brought up the point, the field conditions a little bit dicey and slidey there, that Atlanta would be able to score tonight against Philadelphia. The Eagles still have some questions to answer in that secondary. Could it be a ripe scenario for Kirk Cousins, who put up more than 360 yards in the Week 2 primetime spot against the Birds a season ago, throwing for 4 touchdowns as a member of the Vikings? So, DRS, let's dive even deeper then and look at the props. Kirk Cousins passing yards number 224.5. Jalen Hurts 230 and a hook. How do you compare these two quarterbacks entering Monday night?
Yeah, I'm not in love with either one of these, but if I were to say who's probably more likely to go over their total, I'm probably going to lead to Jalen Hurts at that 230.5. The reason being here is the Philadelphia Eagles last week, again, you have to remove that. There was unfair conditions for both of the defending teams here. We'll see if they step back up, but you did have a couple cornerbacks last week that were beat up that should be back in the lineup tonight for the Eagles. Also, Devin White, starting linebacker, who you thought in the offseason was their big acquisition, ended up getting beat out by Nakobe Dean, but he missed game number 1 with an injury. He's back in this game. So I do think the Eagles will be much more formidable, which means, Ben, that pass rush is going to get home on Kirk Cousins. And as we know, Kirk Cousins doesn't look like he's 100% not firing on all cylinders. No. Do I think the Pittsburgh Steelers overall have a better defense than the Philadelphia Eagles? Yes, I do. But the Atlanta Falcons were embarrassing on opening day. The only bright spot was Bijan Robinson. But if we're just focusing on the quarterbacks here for total prop markets, like rushing props, you're not looking at Kirk Cousins to run the football. You might be looking at Jalen Hurts to do that. Passing props here, I still think decent enough weapons on the outside where the Eagles can expose some things here on that Falcons defense, even though I do think the Falcons defense is better this year than it was last year. But I'm more apt to vote and bet on Jalen Hurts than I would on Kirk Cousins tonight.
155 yards for Cousins in his Atlanta debut last week against the Steelers. We know Pittsburgh is a good defense. TJ Watt was wrecking havoc all day long against that ATL offensive line. But 155 yards, 16 of 26, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions, including an INT thrown in the final 3 minutes of the game as Atlanta had the ball down by 5, trying to score and win and into Pittsburgh territory. Kirk did not look right. He turned 36, back in August. And unlike Aaron Rodgers, who tore his Achilles 4 offensive plays into the 2023 campaign, Kirk Cousins was injured after playing 8 games in that 9th game of the year for Minnesota. Less of a time to respond and come back. Again, we'll hear from Dr. Chow in just a moment. That will be my main question for Monday night. But DRS, on the ground, we should see a couple of great do-it-all backs tonight. Saquon Barkley, 3 touchdowns in his Eagles debut in Brazil. Bijan Robinson did not score, but had more than 110 scrimmage yards, was really that main bright spot for the Falcons offensively in a rather porous offensive performance in the season opener. If you're going to look for the prop perspective tonight, a lot of focus will be on the 2 backs.
Love them both. Love them both tonight, Ben, because if we're looking at pretty strong secondaries on both sides here, that's the way that you're going to want to go. And particularly, what sticks out a lot is Bijan Robinson, 64.5 rushing yards. You saw the Green Bay Packers torch the Philadelphia Eagles defense. But again, cause for food for caution here. You can't actually take that Green Bay game and say, you know what, they're going to be able to do the same things that they did because you couldn't block, you couldn't hold your blocks at that point, so you remove that. But if we are looking at more of a ground game here, I'll let both of these guys. And also, my goodness, man, the touchdown props, where were the days where everybody was at least plus money or like the favorite on the board was a plus 100 to score a touchdown?
Gracious,
minus 185 and minus 125, you can tell where the public wants to go. If you're looking at who's going to score tonight, Bijan. And here's what I love, too, about Bijan Robinson, game number 1. Remember last year, Ben, you draft a running back in the top 10. He's like, why is he splitting carries with Tyler Algier? Nothing against Algier. He's a quality running back. But you saw that separation finally in game number 1. 18 carries to 3. Bijan is the lead dog. Love to see it. And, of course, on Philadelphia, it's Saquon Barkley. I don't think we have to worry about, I can't believe they keep handing the football to the backup here. Those 2 guys are going to tow it tonight, and I think both of them can score touchdowns. But you know where I love them, Ben? I love them in that receiving market, man. 30.5, and also you dip down here to Saquon Barkley at 17.5. Man, that's 1 or 2 screen passes, and away we go tonight.
23 yards receiving for Saquon Barkley in week number 1. Now, to your point about the anytime touchdown prop for Bijan Robinson. Again, he did not score last week in Atlanta's opener. They only put up 10 points, so I guess that makes sense. He had 5 targets and 5 grabs for 43 yards receiving, but he only had 4 rushing touchdowns last year in his rookie campaign. 4 receiving scores, had 1 receiving touchdown in the final 4 games for the Falcons. He doesn't necessarily have the touchdown pay dirt price pedigree that Saquon Barkley does, and yet he is a minus money number to score. Maybe that should lead us to believe that Bijan will cash that number. Monday Night Football to end out week number 2 of the 2024 NFL season. It's a prop perspective here on this Monday with SportsGrid's Tom Vecchio. Vecchio, as always, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here on this Monday. Excited to dive in to Monday Night Football in Philadelphia between the Eagles and the Falcons with you.
Yeah, let's get things going. We have an interesting game. This is the 3rd straight season that Kirk Cousins is playing the Eagles in week 2, which is a little bit bizarre. It's primetime Kirk. Injuries on the Eagles side with A.J. Brown not playing. We want to see a bounce back, or at least I want to see somewhat of a bounce back from the Falcons offense overall. Let's dive in.
Philadelphia, 5.5-point home favorite tonight, Tom, to end out this second week of the NFL season. 46.5 is that over-under. We always use the numbers to inform what we expect the game to look like tonight. Are we going to see some points? Will the offensive numbers be up there? Will Atlanta keep this game closer than the odds makers expect? Vecchio, what do you think Monday Night Football looks like in Philly?
I think we are in for a slow start, and I think a live over 41.5 or 42 is probably the best spot to go. So 5.5, I think, is spot on. Again, if we can get that at 3 for the Eagles, I'd be significantly more interested in that. The Falcons didn't look good in week 1, but so a lot of teams didn't look good in week 1. And, the Eagles with a little bit extra rest, I want to say one of the key things I'm going to be focusing in on is, will their offensive line smooth out some of the issues that they had? The snaps weren't 100% clean in week 1, but they had that extra time. Can they get that under control, and can they put the offense in a great spot? And then for the Falcons, a slow game, like I said, outside of Robinson, where are we going to see production from the Falcons, and will they be able to exploit at least some of the issues that we saw with the Eagles secondary from week 1?
Yeah, it should be fun to watch you play because we're still in week 2 mode where yesterday we watched the majority of teams close out their week 2. Who's good, who's bad, who bounced back from week number 1. We don't necessarily have that. And also, it's 2 tough performances, Tom, as you said, really, to grade. Atlanta's week 1 performance on offense is Kirk Cousins healthy. What's going to take place? They played a very good Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Then the Philadelphia Eagles on that ice skating rink down in Brazil. Are they really this bad on defense stopping the run, or will they be able to get off blocks? We'll find out. But let's get to the quarterback equation of this. Jalen Hurts versus Kirk Cousins. If we're looking at the passing props here, Jalen Hurts currently listed at the FanDuel Sportsbook at 229. Kirk Cousins just below him at 224. If you look at the passing touchdowns, obviously both of them at 1.5, but juiced to the plus 122 for Hurts and for Kirk Cousins, plus 148. Which quarterback are you looking at tonight with possibility of some props, Tom?
It wouldn't surprise me if Hurts has a good game, but still hits the under on his touchdown prop just because they're going to get to the red zone. They don't have that big target with A.J. Brown. Not to say there aren't options in the passing offense that I like for a touchdown. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But I wouldn't be surprised if he hits the under and he rushes one in and Saquon rushes one in and he has one passing touchdown. So I'm a little bit hesitant when it comes to that passing number for the touchdowns at least. For Kirk Cousins, I think the yards are probably the spot to be going. If they fall behind, they're going to be put into a passing game script. They gave him all this money for a reason. They gave it to him because they need a boost in offense. They have a completely new offensive scheme, a new OC, new head coach, et cetera, et cetera. So let's kind of flex that. And we saw some of the big plays by the Packers receivers in week 1. They have some of that talent with Drake London. So if they can show that, that'll put Kirk Cousins in a good spot to hit the over. I don't want to talk about primetime Kirk and his inability to cover, win games, whatever it might be. I think the stats will be there for Kirk Cousins tonight. Whether they come away with the win, I'm not so sure about.
It is interesting, Vecchio, because you do mention 3 consecutive years for Kirk Cousins in week 2 in a primetime spot in Philadelphia. Of course, the prior 2 with the Vikings. 2 years ago in 2022, it was not a good game for Minnesota or Kirk. Philly won that game 24-7. Kirk Cousins had 3 interceptions. Last year, the Vikings technically covered by the hook in a high-scoring game, 34-28. Minnesota 6.5-point underdog. He threw for 364 yards and 4 touchdowns. So outside of the quarterbacks, let's go to their backfield mates and Bijan Robinson and Saquon Barkley. Both guys putting up more than 110 scrimmage yards in week number 1. Saquon scored 3 times, 2 rushing, 1 receiving. Bijan did not find pay dirt as Atlanta only scored 10 in a season-opening loss against Pittsburgh. When you look at these two, who can do it all, what gets your main attention?
Honestly, the over for both of them when it comes to combined rushing plus receiving. And I think it fits the game script kind of regardless of what happens. We know the Eagles are going to be without A.J. Brown. And if they want to run the ball a little bit more and or they're ahead, that just plays into Saquon having a ton of carries and controlling the clock, and he piles up yards because he's awesome and they're just going to be moving the ball. And if we see Robinson, they fall behind, he's going to have his rushing attempts, which gives him a good baseline. But then the receiving work from him, I think, can be very interesting. We didn't see a whole lot of it from Josh Jacobs in week 1, but Robinson does play a good role. His receiving prop is sitting at 4.5 receptions, so he's going to be playing a role in the receiving game. So again, a combined over for either of them, if you just have a side that you want to, you think the Falcons cover and you just want to roll with Robinson, totally fine. I'm on board with that. And if you think the Eagles roll and they're out ahead and Saquon just has a big game because of that, I think that's totally fine as well. I don't think there's really a wrong way to go about at least the backfield tonight.
With A.J. Brown out, brings up a lot more opportunities on the Philadelphia Eagles side to try to buy low at that position. Devontae Smith, who last week here, before we got the news that A.J. Brown was going to miss this game, was hovering around the 60-yard mark. He was actually as high as 73.5 at the FanDuel Sportsbook this morning, back to 71.5. Drake London, 57.5 here for Atlanta. A couple tight ends, Pitts and Goddard, 41 and 43.5 respectively here. And also, Jahan Dotson. Didn't see much work in week number 1. Looks like he's going to be thrust into that starting role at 27.5. How are you approaching the receiving props here, Tom, tonight?
When it comes to receiving, I have a position on Smith already for a touchdown at plus 170. I got that on Saturday when there was the first news that A.J. Brown was listed as questionable, always jumping on the news early. I would also like him over his longest reception, sitting at 23.5, 11 out of 16 games last year. He had a reception of at least 21 yards. So that's the first spot. They traded for Jahan Dotson for a reason. So there is some relative coach speak, team speak, GM speak, whatever you want to call it, that they want to get him involved. So seeing him hit an over wouldn't surprise me. I think Dallas Goedert has to be the most interesting option of that bunch. His touchdown odds are sitting at plus 200, plus 210, wherever it might be. We can certainly look there. The yards, I think, have to be the most interesting, because if we're seeing at least some defensive adjustments from the Falcons to take away Smith in certain circumstances, worrying about Jahan Dotson may not be an every play thing for them, and that leaves that safety blanket for Dallas Goedert. So there's an opportunity for all three of the receivers to have a big game. I don't think it'll be all three. I think it'll come down to Smith for a touchdown and Goedert for the yards.
When you see Dallas Goedert 43.5, of course, if we talk tight ends, we got to look at the other side for the Falcons. It's year number 4 with Kyle Pitts. Since he was drafted 4th overall in 2021, we have asked the question, is Kyle Pitts going to be what we expected out of Florida with the acquisition of Kirk Cousins and the expected uptick in offensive production? A lot of people said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We're not getting fooled again. We're going to Kyle Pitts this year with Kirk. Does it finally happen starting week 2, Vecchio, between Pitts and Cousins tonight in Philadelphia?
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that it started in week 1 when he had the touchdown. I think they need to make a more conscious effort to get Drake London involved. So while I'm very high on Kyle Pitts, as I have him on my most important dynasty team for the past 4 years, I'm waiting for him to break out. I'm not sure if it's going to be this game. I think that they need to get Drake London more involved. And, as I'm going to continuously say, we saw Reed and Dobbs break off these big plays last week, and that should be the point of emphasis to get Drake London, their best receiver, the ball. So get him the ball. I'm going with Pitts under 41.5. I just don't know if he plays a massive, massive role. And if the pass rush can get after Kirk Cousins, that's where Robinson will come into play out of the backfield with the low A-dot passes, because Kirk Cousins won't have a lot of time to drop back and find deep targets.
Vecchio, quickly here, 40 seconds left. The outlook for both of these teams, they entered the year as divisional favorites. Philly feeling good in the NFC East. Atlanta facing a potential 0-2 start. Looking at the Saints and the Bucs starting 2-0. What do you make of the outlook for the Falcons?
If you want to buy in on the Falcons, it actually might be a good idea to wait till after the game. If they lose this game, their odds will be a little bit longer. You buy in then. You don't think the Saints and the Bucs continue to roll, and then you get back in on Atlanta at that point. But it's a little bit of wait and see for the Falcons on where they're going to land overall.
Vecchio, we'll see you tonight getting ready for Monday Night Football on SportsGrid. More on the early lineup next. Live right here on the early line on this Monday to set up the end of week number 2, the Monday night finale in Philadelphia. He is Donnie, I am Ben. The Birds, that being the Eagles, a 5.5-point home favorite tonight, total of 46.5 against Atlanta. DRS, it was a week for the underdog in the early window on the Sunday slate. We saw 3 teams booked as at least a 6.5-point underdog win outright. In fact, so far this season, teams that have been booked as a 6-point underdog or greater are a perfect 8-0 against the spread. You see 6 there. It's live 5.5 now in favor of Philly. All to say, is this game more competitive than the rather lofty spread in the Birds' favor would indicate?
Oh, it will be. No doubt about it. And also, by the way, a little bit of action at the FanDuel Sportsbook here, dragging that price down to 45.5 as a total within the past couple minutes. So I think a lot of people are looking at this game saying we might be hunkered in to a defensive struggle, which is kind of crazy. Open up the year, what did we love about Atlanta? It wasn't necessarily the defense. Hey, Kirk Cousins, good quarterbacks and weapons down there. And the Philadelphia Eagles with one of the most talented offense pound for pound in the NFL, particularly at the skill positions. Now we're talking about the 47.5 down to 45.5. Make some sense, right? And also, the Eagles coming in well-rested here off of a performance in Brazil. And then you see Atlanta last week playing on last Sunday, now getting to the Monday. So we should be healthy enough in this game with A.J. Brown down. But it still leads me, like I think the under should be the right play in this game. But also, sometimes there's value if it continues to go down because the hot button right now is on those unders. There still are weapons on both sides here and a lot of question marks on each side. Are the Atlanta Falcons healthy? Was last week Kirk Cousins playing coy? Can he stand up in the pocket? He's going to struggle because it's a Monday night primetime game. Those will be answered. We have 2 dynamic backfields with Bijan Robinson and Saquon Barkley. You still have talented wide receiver in Drake London. He's young and unused so far this season. Kyle Pitts also talented. And then you take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Heisman Trophy winner, still left at wide receivers, and you brought in Jahan Dotson and still have Dallas Goedert in a quality offensive line. And we're not asking about 53.5, 54.5. It's 45.5 now. That's very manageable in this spot. For me, I do think the Eagles win, but I'm not as excited to lay the points here until we actually see it. As Tom Vecchio brings up, it's a great point. FanDuel Sportsbook, if you don't like what you see early on in the season, you can wait a quarter or two before you jump in and like an over and under or a side here. Because if Kirk Cousins opens this game and he's not really that good, they might get blown out. But if Kirk Cousins is average from the pocket and that Philadelphia Eagles pass rush, which didn't get home on that slippery turf, doesn't get home tonight, maybe has extra time to throw, and that could help. Because he had no time against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it looked like.
And you could do that with the Crew Pro Football today, but tonight it's called NFL Football In-Game Live Game Day for Monday Night Football between the Falcons and the Eagles. Donnie right side, Joe Lisi, and Kevin Walsh. Total working its way down. It was 46.5 just about an hour ago. The under had the hefty juice, which has moved it down to 45 and a hook, and the under still has the juice. I will be fascinated, Donnie, because I circled this game early in week 2 and said to myself, this is the time for the Falcons offense to be the scoring output team that we expected with the acquisition of Kirk Cousins. But just how healthy is Kirk last week? 16 of 26. 155 yards, a touchdown pass to Kyle Pitts. That was the only positive. 2 interceptions, including as the Falcons were driving into Steelers territory, under 3 minutes remaining in regulation, down by just a single score. Trying to win the football game at home. He throws his second costly interception of the game. He's a 36-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles that he suffered in the 9th game last year for Minnesota, or the 8th game for Minnesota. Regardless, it's not the same timetable even for Aaron Rodgers, who was a little bit shaky and rusty on Monday night last week. Kirk Cousins, though, does have at least some experience in these spots. Not just primetime. We'll talk primetime record in a second. But week 2 in a primetime game in Philadelphia. This will be the 3rd straight year he has done so. The previous 2 with Minnesota, the Vikings lost by at least 6 points in Philly. Last year, Kirk threw for more than 360 and 4 touchdowns. Donnie, do you buy in at all to the primetime Kirk Cousins narrative? This will be his 33rd primetime start in his NFL career. He's 12-20 straight up. He is 3-10 outright on Monday Night Football.
Not necessarily. And here's why I say that. Because if you're just betting that, fine, it's a trend, you want to use it, go ahead. But he doesn't perform on primetime. Don't usually get the primetime games because it's a really good competitor that you're going up against, and maybe he just didn't measure up against that team. So I like to take a look at things on an individual basis on a night-to-night, the way it moves here. But I do think, again, he's coming in as the underdog. Theoretically, he's supposed to lose this game, and he should not have as good a game as Jalen Hurts because he's not the favorite, and he's on the road. And also, coming off of week 1, the narrative would be different if they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 37-27, right? But they couldn't move the football, and partly was because we're worried about Kirk Cousins is healthy or not. So, of course, I always like to say, don't outsmart yourself tonight. Hey, I think he's going to have a great bounce back. He might be able to do that, but what I saw in week number 1, I'm going to need to see something much better in week number 2 to sort of press that lever down. So for me in this game, I'm really looking at that depressed wide receiving market, particularly with the Philadelphia Eagles outside of Devontae Smith. Tight end, as we talked with Tom, Dallas Goedert makes a lot of sense. We want to see if Jahan Dotson, 27.5 isn't much if you're a starting wide receiver in the NFL, where Jalen Hurts is going to drop back probably 30-plus times tonight. He should be able to get his opportunities, and he's rightful saying, Howie Roseman's the general manager. Spent a 3rd-round pick on this guy. Coach, you're going to use him here because you ain't going to make me look bad. So that's also one of those things. But also, running back position tonight, Saquon and Bijan, they need to be the cornerstones of your parlay markets tonight. Those 2 guys will get a lot of work in, Ben, I believe.
And that was going to be my follow-up question, DRS. 17.5, Saquon Barkley's receiving yards prop, 30.5, the same number for Bijan Robinson. Combined rushing and receiving, 98 and a hook for Saquon, 101.5 for Bijan Robinson. Both guys over those 2 numbers. Saquon scored 3 times in Brazil. Bijan Robinson did not find pay dirt in week number 1, and yet both heavily juiced to at least score 1 touchdown tonight.
Yes, and also, let's keep in mind, the tush-push didn't look good in Brazil because, A, you couldn't get footing here. So I'm interested to see how that works tonight, and also that the Philadelphia Eagles sort of slow play that a little bit more. Saquon Barkley at home, first primetime game in an Eagles uniform, scored 3 touchdowns the week before. You can't tell me Saquon is not going to get a touchdown tonight in front of the home crowd. Absolutely, he gets that done tonight.
111 scrimmage yards for Bijan Robinson, 43 in the receiving category, 132 for Saquon Barkley, and 3 total scores, 2 rushing, 1 receiving in the Sao Paulo opener against the Packers.